Hey, I'm Julian Morgans, and you're listening to Scammerland. This is our final episode of the series, and over the last 5 eps, we've been looking at how online scams are run by people living in slavery in Southeast Asia. We've been following the stories of 2 people who have been abducted and are trying to escape, and in this last episode, we're following Small Q as he makes a break for freedom. But we're also going to be looking at what all of this means for the world. What do we do now that we know these things exist? Scammer farms are costing us billions of dollars every year, so how are the world's governments trying to deal with this ballooning new threat? Welcome to Scammerland. Alright, let's start this episode with Small Q. As you'll remember from the last episode, he's been brutally tortured. But he's managed to text a Ugandan ambassador using a phone that he stole from his boss.
She was like, I'm happy to hear from you that you guys are all alive. Where are you exactly? So I was able to send a location using WhatsApp with my team. I wouldn't say that I did this all alone because we're, exchanging, ideas and everything.
This ambassador is a woman named Betty Bigombe, and she contacted a man named Judah Tanner, who we heard from in the last episode. And they got to work rescuing not just Q, but 22 other Ugandans who had been sold into slavery. But it was taking a while, and Q was trying to work as little as possible, just hoping that they'd give up and let him go.
We are not productive. They actually scared us at a point to be like, we're going to kill you to get maybe organs, you guys, and sell you to get our money back.
This wasn't an empty threat. The UN has seen cases where scammer farm victims are murdered and their organs get sold on the black market. So Judah was doing everything he could to get Q out, but it was just taking time.
I remember talking and chatting to him and to his group and being like, we're trying our hardest, but we could not give any assurances until the day that they actually stepped onto that barge.
Meanwhile, what was happening was that Betty Bigombe, the Ugandan ambassador, had asked to meet with the Burmese militia leader running the scammer farm region. Her plan? Basically, she was just going to ask him to release the Ugandans.
The interesting thing is she's got a lot of bravery, and if you read her bio, she has not been afraid of walking into the African warlords area, into the jungles, into the bushlands, and negotiating with the worst of the worst in order to save her people. It wasn't very different. We asked her, would she consider a conversation with the militia group?
Judah, through some people who knew some people who knew some people, was able to set up this meeting. And Betty went in to meet this general who is orchestrating this war against the official Myanmar government. And he's a pretty dangerous man.
And in that conversation, she had shared about how her Ugandans actually shed blood in Myanmar, that they fought for the same thing that this Karen group were fighting for. And so she came at that very level with him, and she pleaded with him for her people.
And this actually worked. Betty's pleas sufficiently moved this warlord, and his team took a list of names into the scammer farms to confirm that they had these people.
We were talking to many people within the compound, texting, messaging, trying to get, passport numbers, names, identification. We really had to be able to pinpoint exactly which building they were in.
The next step involved arranging transport and accommodation for 23 people. And this involved assuring the Thai government that these people wouldn't become their problem.
So Thai military accepted the job of receiving these victims of human trafficking.
So this very delicate diplomatic dance has been choreographed between the local militia in Myanmar, the Thai government, and the Taiwanese scammer farm owners who they just have to play ball because they're renting the land from Myanmar. And everyone agreed to this exchange, and the big day arrived.
We woke up one day, it was around 11 a.m., and they told us, pack your stuff and go. This was like a dream. We didn't actually believe. I remember I even forgot a lot of stuff there, my property there, like the clothes, everything, because we rushed. I just woke up, I put everything in the bag, then I got outside. They made us make a line. They told us, march to the gate.
That morning, On the Thai side of the border, Judah's team had been frantically trying to find someone who'd meet the Ugandans outside their compound. Because he'd been told if anything went wrong or if there were any delays, all the Ugandans would go straight back into the compound.
At 7 a.m. in the morning, we were running around that area just trying to find a military leader that would agree to receive them that morning. And we didn't even have the okay yet.
The stakes are very high here and very real. Judah told me he's seen lots of people on the cusp of freedom get sent back into the scammer farms just due to a delay in the handover or because of some small, very minor screw-up. And he managed to find someone to meet the Ugandans who were being marched out.
We couldn't even believe that we are getting out. 23 of us, they read our names. Moises Gideon, that was the first timer, that's my name.
Q and his friends were driven to the river that marks the border between Myanmar and Thailand, and they could see freedom. But the barge motor to bring them across the river, it had broken down, and for Judah, this was a really tense moment.
It took an extra, maybe 45 minutes to an hour for an engineer to come down and fix the motors so that the barge could come across. And we had actually been given a timeline. If this does not happen at this time, they will all be sent back to the compound. And we were down to the wire. I'm holding my breath.
Finally, the engine in the barge coughed to life and 23 Ugandans piled on board, and then the barge chugged across the water.
And I just remember seeing the group and they're waving. I mean, they're just, it's historic, their freedom, their walk of freedom. They came across and of course we had to shake hands with each person as they come and identify who they were, look at their passports, made sure we had them checked off the list so we weren't leaving anyone behind, making sure we had the right numbers and the right people.
And of course, among that crowd was Small Q.
And I was like, yeah, man, we've made it. You can see the smiles on our face that day.
And Judah, he also remembers meeting Q for the very first time.
I remember seeing him sitting by himself at the back, and I just wanted to connect personally with each person. I sat beside him, and he looked at me and he goes, "My name's Small Q." And I was like, "Oh, cool," And he said, "Oh, the other part of it was that I'm actually this semi-famous musician and I'm on YouTube." My backstory is obviously being in the music industry as well at some points in my early youth. And so we sit there on my iPhone just watching his YouTube clips. And I was just amazed that this guy, he didn't show off. He just spoke simply. He was just this young kid in the back of this room and he was subtle.
Yeah, he is.
And I'm watching him on stage and I'm watching him with this bravado and I was like, wow.
I really like this layer to our story. Small Q is this musician, this rapper with 11,000 followers on Instagram and this big YouTube channel, but he's also gone through hell. And he arrived home bruised and battered and much thinner than when he left. But he was alive, which he says was a gift, yeah, but it was a complicated one because he found himself right back where he'd started, but just much worse off.
This was not the Gideon that left in the first place.
Yeah.
The happy one, because man, I went taking selfies, thinking I'm going to change my life and people around me. But now coming back without anything. Imagine my brother. Just my dirty clothes in my bag. Man, this is so emotional, bro.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah, but God is the greatest, man. I was able to come back with life. And this is something that I'm grateful for each and every day.
Q now has a new mission. His role, as he sees it, is to warn his fellow countrymen from travelling to Southeast Asia for unverified jobs. He's been on many news programs throughout Uganda for this reason, and it's why he wanted to come on this show to tell us his story.
I'm not trying to tell that everywhere is bad.
Yeah.
But before you go somewhere, make sure these people, you trust them. Make sure you know someone at least there. Actually, Thailand was not like my dream country to go to. I've always, dreamed to come to countries like Australia, USA. But this was like looking for greener pastures. It
Yeah.
was mainly more about, changing my life. So, yeah, let this be a message to the youth watching us that, man, you have to be so cautious about where you're going before. Make sure the process is right.
We're going to come back to Q at the end of this episode, but we're going to take an ad break here. Stick around, because when we're back, we're going to dive into the global effort to combat scammer farms. Hey, welcome back. So throughout this series, we've been pretty focused on understanding the problem. And I think throughout so many of these interviews, I've been like, oh, we just got to send in the troops, we got to blow this thing up. But we can't do that. And to find out why we can't, I'm going to speak to a man named John Wojciech, who's a regional analyst based in Thailand for the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. This is the UNODC, and I've spoken about these guys before. They're basically our first line of defense against global drug trafficking, cyber fraud, and money laundering. Hello, John. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Can we start with a bit of an introduction? How did you get this job?
I studied law, politics, and philosophy, found my way into the UN working as an intern, ended up moving to the regional headquarters here in Bangkok, where I started to really dig into more of the organized crime portfolio.
I'm trying to place your accent. You Dutch?
Polish-Canadian.
Polish-Canadian.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the Z in your last name was a bit of evidence I ignored, but okay.
No worries, because there's actually no Z in my last name. So the W.
The W. Yeah, right. One of those sort of kinky letters.
Yeah.
So after that really smooth start, I asked John what the UNODC is doing about scammer farms, or what any intergovernmental group can do about scammer farms.
Yeah, it's a pretty daunting question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'd say the way that we look at it is sort of from four pillars.
For the sake of brevity, I'm just going to summarize the four pillars, or what John really means is the four ways that the UNODC is combating scammer farms. So first up, they're collecting information about how these farms work and who runs them. And then they're sharing that information across Asia. So, for example, Cambodia has all the same intel that Thailand has.
So we try to work to sort of expedite that information sharing through formal and informal channels to ideally, protect victims, but also in an ideal scenario, freeze and seize and recover some of the assets that have been stolen.
So that's the first two ways that the UNODC is trying to deal with scammer farms. Then their third method is something that they call convening. And what that is, it's basically bringing together governments with people and NGOs.
So sort of bridging that gap between hardline, frontline law enforcement and the policymaking folks who are in the business of designing solutions and responses.
Then their last pillar is offering forensic services to developing nations that don't have the resources to do it themselves.
Things like digital evidence, digital forensics, a lot of intelligence can be collected from devices, right? But in a lot of these cases, those processes to collect that information, to analyze it and to utilize it in a court of law, not really present.
So the UN can step in and offer their experts to developing countries. And that is the four ways they're trying to combat scammer farms. I guess what I'm hearing is that the problem is this sort of fast-moving, decentralized industry. But it sounds to me like the UNODC's response is quite formal. Like you've got these pillars, but it doesn't sound nearly as nimble as the adversary that you guys are taking on. Like, am I right here? Is this a problem?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I mean, they are highly entrepreneurial. They're extremely agile, and they run their criminal enterprises in the same way that Amazon or Microsoft or any large-scale transnational enterprise might do so, right? They're based on bottom line. They're very rapid in their decision-making. They're extremely efficient in integrating new technologies that can, increase their efficiency and empower them. Traditionally, government systems do not operate the same way, right?
So, in summary, the criminal groups are, in the words of Mark Zuckerberg, moving fast and breaking things. And the UNODC is doing their best to move fast as well, but they're not allowed to break things.
In my mind, when I'm like, how are we going to stop this? I think, we need like the the world sort of police. What is that? Oh, that's kind of the UN. Let's just send in the jet fighters and boots on the ground and let's dismantle these compounds. Like, why can't we do that?
Little word called sovereignty. Yeah, I mean, the way that things work, unfortunately, perhaps is not as you've described. I've been asked previously, like, why can't the UN mobilize some sort of a cross-border effort to, launch an offensive on, what's happening on the Thai-Myanmar border, for instance, right? First and foremost, like we don't have that capability and we don't have that mandate, right? We are a law enforcement adjacent agency. We don't conduct operations or investigations. Secondly, UN peacekeeping forces wouldn't be drawn into that kind of a conflict. And at the end of the day, from my understanding, they would need to be invited by the host government. Even for the Thai government, for instance, who shares a border with some of those operations on the Myanmar side, they're finding it very difficult to address the situation as well, even despite the fact that the Thai tourism industry is now suffering from some of these, human trafficking incidents.
I'd like to point out here that the Thai government has recently started cracking down on Myanmar. In the start of February this year, they cut electricity, internet and fuel supplies to 5 areas along the border in an effort to choke out the scammer farms. And this was a big event. It was widely announced by the Thai government to appease any suggestion that they were complicit. So Thailand has started doing their part, but in the long run, power cuts are pretty ineffective. As we've discussed, these are huge conglomerates. They can just build their own power plants. But the other complication is that these regions in Myanmar have become pretty financially dependent on scamming. This is something that Judah actually pointed out to me. And what he said was that these are regions that have been dirt poor for decades, and now finally they have money, and they're not going to let a simple power outage get in the way of that.
Their people have never had enough to eat. They've never had enough to, build proper roads, have infrastructure. They're now in a position where the first time in the history of their people, they've got enough money to feed everyone, for everyone to have, houses, to bring in electricity, oil, to have cars, roads, infrastructure. They've never had any of this before. And now we're asking for them to give away the one thing that has given them their own independence and some level of a surety of tomorrow, some survival of tomorrow. I think that's where we have to look and say, if we're asking them to close these down, what alternative are we offering them? Is the alternative that they go back to hand-to-mouth subsistence living, where their people have no idea where the next bowl of rice is going to come from? Obviously, that can't be the result, because we're not going to see that happen.
Judah's point here is an incredible exercise in empathy. On the one hand, he's asking us to sympathize with the people who are scamming us. But on the other, he's illuminating why this is just going to be such a hard thing to stamp out. It's not just an illicit business. It's bringing wealth and opportunity to an impoverished war zone. And with that in mind, I asked John whether the world would just have to accept slavery-powered scamming as the new normal.
I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but it sounds like this is going to be hard to beat.
Yeah, I mean, the way that things are trending right now, it's there's maybe a few things that I would say is, first and foremost, we're seeing the criminal groups involved in this activity very quickly emerging into more sophisticated cyber threat actors, right? So they're leveraging malware, they're leveraging advanced methods of laundering their money, and they're developing new platforms in which they can conduct their business. So
what do you mean by new platforms?
So I'm talking about illicit online marketplaces that have specifically popped up in the region on Telegram. They offer, like I mentioned, a bunch of different sort of specialty services, from laundering to web hosting to malware as a service. A bunch of these different things can be found in those platforms.
So I'm kind of imagining like the old Silk Road, like a marketplace where you go and buy drugs and guns. Is it like that, but just a bit more sort of technologically advanced?
Yeah, I would say so. But it's all happening very much out in the open. A lot of these groups have, upwards of like 1 million users, hundreds of thousands is very common. So, I would sort of frame this under a more broader professionalization that's taking place within the industry. And, I think unfortunately we're kind of just getting started with where this is heading.
We're going to take a quick ad break, but when we get back, I'm going to talk to John about how people like you and me, people who are getting scammed, can do things to protect ourselves. Welcome back. So we've been talking to John at the UNODC about what can be done with scammer farms. And the answer is not much, which is all kind of depressing, right? It's just so big. So I figured if the world really is at a loss to stop online scams, the least I can do is ask John how we individuals can protect ourselves.
Is the way forward just like ruthless cynicism at all times? Should I just click on nothing, trust no one, just stay off the internet as much as possible and never go to Myanmar?
It's a question I struggle with, honestly. You are vulnerable. I'm vulnerable, right? And you're being targeted in one way, shape, or form. I'll guarantee you with a platform like yours, with a profile like yours, there are plenty of criminal groups who would love to have access to your Twitter account or to your email to pump out some malicious links to your followers, right? And so I think brushing up on, again, lame cyber hygiene, cyber awareness, as lame and stupid as it sounds, these days is more critical than ever, right? Go check if your emails have been compromised. A lot of open source tools to kind of work on that hygiene piece, right? See where you're exposed online. See what comes up when you Google yourself, right? If you've got the resources, maybe pay a company to help you wipe that out. And unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, it's going to take some growing pains, if you will, right? Whether that means being scammed or having your having an email sent to yourself from your own email that asks for Bitcoin.
I think after talking to John and after talking to Judah and Troy and Small Q and Catalea, I'm bringing us to a pretty somber conclusion. I don't think this industry can be stopped. It's in this era of rapid expansion, and I think just even slowing it down is impractical. So that's brought me to this place of wondering what purpose this podcast serves. I mean, sure, it's entertaining in a morbid way, but what are we trying to do here? And I think the answer is education. As in, now you know what's happening. Now you can be extra wary about starting an online conversation with someone who refuses to meet, or clicking on a link from an unknown source, or moving to Southeast Asia for a job that seems too good to be true. That's ultimately what this series is about. It's just spreading the word about what's happening so that hopefully scammer farms find it harder to recruit and harder to scam. And I think that's the best we can aim for. Small Q is home in Uganda now, and he's doing everything he can to warn people from traveling to Asia. He's talking to media, he's posting on social media, and he's writing music about scammer farms. In fact, some of you watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you might have noticed right at the very beginning of this series, in Ep 1, we used this video clip from one of Q's songs, which included shots of him tied up on a wall. This song is about his experience in the scammer farm, and this video clip references his experience in the darkroom. In fact, he says that he wrote some of the music in his head just while he was suspended on hooks by his handcuffs.
Even in the dark room, I used to write a lot of songs, including a song that I made talking about my story, which is called Tumutende. It means, let's praise him. Tumutende is a Ugandan word. Let's praise him. If you read the lyrics of this song, it starts when I'm saying the owner of the world, he can control this world. So why don't you praise him? He can get you out of any situation. He was able to get me out of hell. I'm sure he can give me a good future. I don't know if I can give you a sample of that song here.
I would love to hear it. Absolutely.
Nanyini mawangoyo muita defender mwana wa katonda ngani na gwentiani silina mulala you are my darling ngani na gwentiani silina mulala you are my darling tumutende can we sing together? If you don't mind.
Let's do it. All right. Okay.
Tumutende.
Tumotende. Is that the words?
That's it, my brother.
Are they the words?
I'm making you to speak Luganda now. Yeah, that's it.
That's you got a beautiful voice. That really took me somewhere. That was amazing.
I'm sure you don't understand everything in this song, but based on what I've told you, you can now relate.
He's right. I didn't really understand what we sang, but the mood got me. And although we've covered some of the worst parts of humanity through this series, I feel like Small Q represents some of the best.
I always give hope to people that you don't have to worry about me. I'm going to be fine. I still have bigger dreams now, actually. Like, I want to go back to school, finish with school, that computer science and everything, to get that degree, so that I get a perfect job for it. Yeah, man, so that's it. I'm still me.
Well, Small Q, this has been such a pleasure. I mean, it's a horrible story, but talking to you and sharing this with you has been a real pleasure.
It's such a blessing, man. I've been so blessed to be here to share my story to the world. You know, it's going to help a lot of people that, you know, have ideas about going to countries where they, you know, have no anyone they know. They're not sure about what they're going to do. So if someone watches this, is going to think twice.
So Q is getting his life back on track in Uganda, and if you'd like to help out, he has a GoFundMe link, and we're going to put it in the show notes. And last thing, just before we go, Judah and his team at Global Advanced Projects rely on donations to do the work rescuing people from scammer farms. It's vital work, and they're not connected to any government, so it's all independent. So if you're looking for a way to help, this would be it. Global Advanced Projects, donations. Just Google that and you'll find their page, and anything you give is tax deductible. Special thanks to all of our guests: Katalea, John Wojciech from the UNODC, Troy Gerkenauer from the Global Anti-Scam Organization, and a special thanks to Small Q and to Judah Tanner, without whom this series would have never been possible. That was the final episode of this season of Scammerland. Scammerland was produced by Rachel Tuffrey, editing by me, Rachel Tuffrey, and Jamie Snyder. It was mixed by Jimmy Saunders, who also did our sound design. Our cover art is by Rich Akers. Our interns are Nina Fussell and Ellie Dickey. And this whole thing has been a Superreal production.
Superreal.